Niceea for today, Why an Ancient Creed Still Matters, by Coleman Ford and Sean Wilhite. Sean is not here for health reasons, but Coleman is, and he'll be responding to the feedback that he received. Hopefully there will be time for questions from the audience or any interaction with the presenters. This is kind of free form and can go in any number of different directions. But before I forget, thanks to Stefano, to Luke, and to Malcolm for excellent presentations, excellent responses to an excellent book that you should make use of. It'll make you a more excellent Christian. How's that? Using excellent as many times as I could put together. So,
all right, excellent, thank you. Well, first off, I do want to extend my gratitude. Thank you for the time that you read and responded to this book. The care that you took for this is something that I don't take lightly. I know Sean would communicate the same thing. As any of us, excuse me, who have written anything, whether that's an article or a book, for it to be received, for it to be read and then commended is just a humbling thing. So I'm extremely humbled right now. Humbled by those who've, both in this session and other places, communicated both their appreciation for the book and the use of that book. That's also the thing that you want, that it gets used for the purpose that it was intended for. So first off, I just want to, as the shout out at the beginning, to Wilco. I was a Wilco fan before your class, but coming into your class, I mean this in all sincerity, I had the experience of thinking, oh, I can listen to my music theologically now. And I had no tools to do that before your course in theology. And now we talk about that on a regular basis. And my colleague Blake did a whole paper on that yesterday, which was really fruitful. So the intention is of this book, just to clarify, and then I want to respond to this. Sean and I thought, okay, let's write a book for the 18-year-old student that's in front of us. So we teach primarily in an undergraduate context. So I'm at Southwestern Seminary. We have an undergraduate program, so that's where I mainly teach. Sean teaches at California Baptist, though he does some adjunctive work at Gateway. But we wanted our 18-year-old student to love Nicaea, the big, beautiful creed, and to party like it was 325. And I can't remember the thing that Malcolm said that we can tattoo on our arm later. But yeah, most excellent. Something with P's. There's 3 P's in there. I can't remember now. Parsimony or something. Okay. I have the paper. I'll quote it. But yeah, the 18-year-old that's in front of us. And to think about who's the 18-year-old, metaphorically speaking, in front of you, could be a church member that's new to the faith, could be someone who's thinking about these things for the first time, though they've been a believer, read their Bible, but have not had the categories for creedal explanation and affirmation. That was my story growing up in the church, not the Baptist church. I was loved into the Baptist church in college, but had no categories for theology, certainly no categories for a creedal foundation and affirmation. So if you pick up the book and you read it, just know we're thinking of the 18-year-old, whether physically or metaphorically. And we do have a sort of a emoji. No one picked up on the emoji reference that we had in there. Some of you remember that, maybe, I don't know. Let me respond first, just in order, because that's the best way that I can do this. First, to Stefano, thank you for bringing in your expertise in historiography of the early church. That was clear in your presentation, Theodoret and others that you mentioned. To bring about, well, first off, the distinction that, even as we read through different quotes, to clarify divinity and deity, that was really helpful to me. It's easy to interchange those words, as you mentioned, but yeah, Arius affirms the divinity of Christ. What does he mean by that? That's the, and yeah, even someone was telling me that they ran into a Jehovah's Witness yesterday, and you're like, well, they're kind of affirming that. They just don't mean it the same way we do. So to use deity, I think, is a much helpful clarity in teasing that out. I also appreciated, because it's something that Sean and I talk about all the time, and I was tempted to do my Sean impersonation. I'm not going to do that. It's sort of like a cross between a theologian and Keanu Reeves, so whatever that means. So I'm going to do him justice and honor him by not doing that. But to think about the idea of character and the way that character impacts our Bible reading, it's certainly the case that doing Bible reading ought to impact your character, although that's not always the case, as we know. But it is a point that we want to highlight, and most likely didn't highlight enough, that ill-shaped character or malformed character or even nefarious character, however you want to put that, certainly impacts interpretation and impacts how you piece together the scriptures and how you wish to present the scriptures. So I do regret that we didn't avoid that, or that we didn't discuss that as much as we ought to have. And of course, we did have in the mind, okay, there are some descriptions of areas that were given by his enemies, so to speak, and you want to be careful with that, you know. Is it the case that he died in a certain way? Well, I don't want to describe it, but in a certain way, yeah. And it might be the case that medically, biologically speaking, he did pass away in that way. We don't want to describe it in its full detail. But all that being said, kind of keeping that in mind, we don't want to give ourselves over to heresiology and thinking about the way that people were often described posthumously. I want to honor image bearers. It's kind of the way that I want to take that. Heretic is not a light word. I'm not saying we shouldn't use it. I think we tried to make that clear in the book, that there is a gasping effect that we should have when we see or hear the word Arius. I still have students who come into different classes I've taken that are taken with me, and I'll mention Arius and just off comment, and then they'll gasp. I'm like, well, that was 3 classes ago, but I'm glad you remember that. So yeah, we should be serious when we use the word heresy, and we do need to be careful. But we also need to honor the image bearer. I've become more convinced of that. And pray, to whatever degree we can, that we are aware that those who we might consider erroneous and might, even in their character, have displayed that the grace of God is not, can still reach that individual. So I think personally, I'm committed to that. It doesn't mean we don't address their error, it doesn't mean we don't take it seriously by any means. And I really appreciate, and again, I regret the fact that we didn't expand upon what the teaching ministry of the church includes. Stefan, I think your critique of that was exactly right. A previous volume that we wrote had to do with pastoral ministry, sort of the role of the pastor, exploring the fathers and sort of the pastoral role. So I think as we were writing this almost at the same time, so I think we probably had that in mind, that the pastor's the guardian of this. But by no stretch of the imagination should we exclude biblically qualified women who are teaching in the church and called up old doctrine. I can't remember if you mentioned this exactly, but just made me think of every Christian who's committed to the scriptures, right, to make sure that their doctrine is sound. So I think that's something that's a helpful observation. And yeah, I was, when you said it, I was like, did she say it wrong with the UCBI? I thought that was good. Sean wrote that. I don't know. No, yeah, just to be more careful in the articulation of that and to explore that in more precision. I can't remember ultimately what might have been the issue there, but I appreciate that. And then I think, I can't remember how you framed this, so regardless, I took it as a helpful feedback and critique, but just to make sure that we sharpen Constantine's view of himself in the midst of that controversy. I think we used the word patron. I think we probably used that too loosely. I don't think he designated himself that. I feel like, and I will take credit, I wrote that one. Maybe sort of a self-proclaimed in some ways, kind of in some. I'm thinking of that sort of the Roman patron idea, patron-client relationship, and I've taught it that way, where you kind of have that in the background. You kind of see that at some level shaping the relationship. But I can't remember if you quoted Socrates. Which historian did you quote?
Socrates.
Yeah. To bring those in again, with the shortness of the volume, you kind of have to think about where you can cut. So I had those sort of laid out in the notes. Here's the Socrates, here's the Osman, but didn't end up including those as much. So I appreciate your feedback and critique on that as a historian, and specifically a historian of the early church in that way. For you, Luke, like this party, like it's 3:25. I am not someone who would call himself a dogmatic theologian, so that's extremely helpful to bring that clarity. And I appreciate what you said as far as the sort of social character of theology. I'm trying to remember all that you mentioned in that. But that idea of responding and thinking about, even as this session speaks to culture and what's going on in the culture, I think that was a good, helpful reminder. What else did I mention or think about here? Oh yeah, I mean, again, the creed is not something that can unpack every single facet of dogmatic theology, but in its acuteness, it does touch on every part of dogmatic theology. I appreciated that observation. And to maybe even lend sort of a bridge over to what Malcolm was talking about, both dogmatic and also systematic expressions are present in the creed in that way. So I appreciate that. And yeah, the image that you kept using as far as planetary, solar images, that was cool. I like that. I appreciated that. Might have to steal that, to be honest. Borrow and cite. What's the phrase? Artists borrow? I don't know. Anyways. But yeah, and I'll tell Sean that we're all dogmatic theologians now. I appreciate that. But yeah, I regret that he wasn't here to receive that. And for Malcolm, as a colleague, I appreciated your careful reading of the text. These, I know, are things that you're thinking about all the time and that you've been, in some ways, publicly advocating for. So I know this comes from a heart of not only a theologian, but as a churchman. So I heard that and I appreciated that. I appreciated the kindness in which you presented your remarks and comments. And yeah, just as you read the quotes that you were just sort of showing where Sean and I were asserting certain things. Again, that reminder back to Stefana, we use the word divinity a lot, so that just reminded me as you were reading some things that I needed to clarify that. But also to think about, you touched on this, that heresy does have consequences. And that we as theologians, as leaders in the church, thinkers, dare I say evangelical thought leaders, that's something that we need to be clear about and not apologize for, and not to show, just not to side skirt anything, but to really stand your ground. So some comments that you made there really helped solidify that in my mind. And truly is something that I want to take seriously in my own teaching, in my own doctrine. But otherwise, I just want to express my thanks for the readership of this book. And really the hopeful goal, the intended goal of this work, as all of you sort of unpacked in your responses, is to help, though we are all Southern Baptists, is to help the evangelical church appreciate the confessional and creedal heritage that we have. We are not a cult, as we were talking about earlier. We're not like a Jehovah's Witness who actually, or Latter-day Saint that affirms the errors that we're actually talking about here. We find ourselves, and not to situate ourselves rightly, in the Orthodox tradition of the Christian church. And as I heard in another session, to not be apologetic as to we are a part of the whole church, according to the whole. And whether that speaks to you in this room as a maybe Free Church Evangelical or Southern Baptist, that's something that we can't emphasize enough in our context, especially where most of us here of the panel teach. And most of my students who maybe are scared and tempted to go into other traditions that might affirm that more explicitly. And if there's reasons for them doing that, that's fine. But as Baptists and Free Church believers, to recognize that we are not without foundation, which of course is the scriptures, but in the creedal affirmations that have arisen from that, we have a firm footing. And that's something that we should appreciate and unpack even more, especially as this conference unfolds. I have no other comments except I'm happy to take other questions. Questions about the book, questions about Sean's personal life. What I will say is, one thing that did come up, the term that we use, to give credit where credit's due, the term that we use to call thinking Nicenely, that we use throughout the book, if you've seen it, if not, I can explain that in every chapter we have sort of a summary statement, sort of a thesis type statement that's driving every chapter, and we essentially call it thinking Nicenely. Well, to give credit again where credit's due, that's from Sean's wife, Allison. She was reading the manuscript, it was sort of an early draft, and she looked up at Sean and said, "So what you're trying to tell me is I need to think Nicenely." And we're like, yes, it's sort of like gold for a writer. So anyways, just a shout out to Allison and that. But anyways, yeah, questions, would love to interact more and have a conversation. Yeah, right.
So, as we think about, this 18-year-old, this Gen Zer, so we come here and we use all sorts of big words, and then this book has like emojis and memes and humor and things. Will you talk just a little bit about translating this great stuff to this, this Gen Z audience and what that looks like, and for everybody who hasn't read the book yet, that would be helpful for even kids or nephews or nieces or whatever. Yeah, so you can't reduce the Nicene Creed to a meme or an emoji, but to consider, again, thinking about the topic of this session, culture, and understanding the culture that we're in and the times we're in. Who else said it in here? I can't remember. But yeah, I think even Gen Zers are longing for an anchor in a lot of their life. I mean, especially as we've interacted with them, and seeing the fact that we should not, well, depends on our persuasion, I guess. I don't want to completely remove the technological things or the advantages that we might have had because of development over the past 10 or 15 years, but I certainly want to challenge the strength of language in the current generation, or rather the lack of strength, the weakness of. And I do want to sort of make sure that we are in a rescue mission, so to speak, for words and how words matter. So even though we do use images, which is not wrong to do, we ought to remember that these fathers that gathered at Nicaea cared deeply about the right words. And yes, appropriated some words and defined those biblically, which we ought to be doing even now today. So appropriating songs and appropriating memes, perhaps. Whether Saint Nick punched Arius in the face, which we know is not true, but the meme abides. So, any other thoughts that you have on that, Blake, from your own experience? That's something that I find particularly helpful about this book, is that I could give it to people that aren't going to read any other book on this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you, having had this book out now for a little while, have you used it in your own work with undergrads? What has been their response?
Yeah.
How are they doing parted exegesis? See, because I actually thought this book was hard for an 18-year-old. It surprises me. So how are you doing that? There's like father after father after father after father sometimes cited the Augustine, Athanasius, Cappadocians, Life of Moses, works mentioned and stuff. I mean, how well, what kind of scaffolding needs to be created for an 18-year-old? It doesn't matter how many emojis you put in, or how many like, hey dude, or bam and bang and stuff, but how are you scaffolding this for an 18-year-old in this culture?
That's good.
To get it, because these are works that our seminary and div students are doing, and still it's hard to explain what is participation, what is the hypostatic, what is the communicatio idiomatum. How are your 18-year-olds taking this book? That's my question to you.
Well, Stefana, I'll let you know in 3 weeks when I teach an inner class using this book.
Okay.
But I think one way to approach that depends on your context and the comfortability that you have with your students, but is to lead with primary sources, which I'm sure you're willing to do, wanting to do, but sort of bite-sized chunks of the primary sources, both from the Pro-Nicene Orthodox perspective as well as heterodox voices, so Eunomius and others that might tell you, oh, here's what they're actually saying. And I think you said this, like when you show in your church group, when you actually put the things that Arius actually said, it's shocking,
Yeah.
And so rather than just let the glossary of terms just wash over you and get confused, I think the primary sources really easily speak for themselves, not without commentary, not without discussion. So practically speaking, that's how we're going to do it in our class. Every day there's a primary source that they'll be reading, and we're actually going to do sort of an Oxford-style debate about the propositions that are putting forth throughout that era. And so, in some ways, to help them communicate it, to think through it, that doesn't make sense of the biblical data. Why would we worship Christ if he's not fully divine? That's idolatrous, you mentioned that. And so to speak to some of those sensibilities, and of course I think depends on the context as well. I don't know if the 18-year-old at, whatever bigger Christian university that I could think of, like whatever, it might be maybe Stanford. I don't know if they're going in to a introduction to Christian thought class with the ability to do this, but for sure in a ministry training environment of an undergrad school where I'm located, it's like a Christian studies, humanities program, there's a greater willingness to hang with that and a greater desire to grow and learn from that. But back to my original point, I think if we're teasing out sort of the primary sources and giving them little bite-sized chunks, I mean, this is on Not Three Gods, it's not that long, so they can read through that and sort of think through the basic logic of that in response to what others were saying about the Trinitarian view. And then also to set the bar high. I think that's another part of this as well. Though we try not to be overly technical, you still have to use those words. You still have to think through some of those things. Drawing out that sort of X from X formulae, and then, I can't remember to what degree we did this, but to demonstrate its worshipful tone and how that informs the spirituality of the Christian. We know Niceea, especially if you've heard papers this week, it wasn't the first time that some of those phrases were used, but it was certainly the first time, perhaps, that those phrases were put together with such fortitude in conjunction with the other Christological assertions and affirmation of the Father and admission of the Holy Spirit. So, I don't know if that fully answered your question. For sure it is, it's not the, the emoji-filled tract that that could be considered, but a high bar setting, yet still hopefully introductory way of doing that.
Can I say something about that? I teach undergrads as well.
How old?
We're 18 to 22, yeah.
Would you use this book for an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old?
Okay, I mean, that is just somewhat different question. But at the same time, like, I think it's not so much that an 18-year-old doesn't have the intellectual ability to comprehend. It's just that we've acculturated Christians to not only to not think about their faith in intellectually demanding ways, but almost to see that as something that is not good, like not spiritual. I mean, because my students, if they can learn, electron orbitals in chemistry and triple integrals in calculus, they can learn the eternal processions. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just think setting the bar high and not sort of fostering this anti-intellectual view of the faith is probably a battle worth fighting.
And I think it's true. I mean, I was not a Bible college grad going to seminary. I went to big state school, got a call to ministry, and so ST 101 was a huge wake-up fire hydrant experience. Like learning all these terms and who are these Gnostic people? That's kind of how I felt that first semester. It's contextually driven, but I agree with Luke that I want to be someone who assumes that our students should be doing this, and then to challenge them into it.
A generation ago, to use icons on books published by Baptist publishers would almost be seen as papal. But this generation is interested in the image. So just a practical question. If Dr. Spiegel and Kreider and I want to reach Gen Z, do we need earrings?
I do want to see that. This is light compared to what I had in college. So, maybe.
That actually was where I was going. You and Sean talk about we're longing to think Nicene and to get our students to think Nicene, but we're doing so in a post-enlightenment way, saying let's focus on the words of the prophets. When Athanasius is Bishop of Alexandria, he transforms the landscapes.
Yes.
Early Christians are depicting Christ in these cupolas, that they're transforming the way that they're depicting Christ in the catacombs. And a number of our students, especially in the undergrad, are drawn to Orthodoxy, Anglicanism, Lutheranism because of the engagement with the embodied visual. What does it look like as Baptists to think Nicenely in a visual, spatial way? How do we do this? Do you and Sean grapple with this? Because the answer isn't just pointing who loves Trinity behind our pulpits.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to start praying to an icon, but what I think we do try to get to in the book is the practices that Nicaea, at least we should include Nicaea as part of that. We should be serious about its inclusion in catechesis, in worship. If your church is not used to reciting the creed, again, I know this is words, but it's also sounds. And as I know you've been thinking through the art piece, but also the musical piece, we know, of course, this is how Arius got his views across. He's got these bar songs that he's writing, which are catchy, and error can implant itself that way. And so, so good music, good biblically, theologically accurate music. It's a little bit trickier, of course, depending on your free church tradition and its sensibilities, as far as its iconoclasm. This is stuff that I know Luke and CBR has talked about as far as what free church Baptist liturgy can look like and can include. Just specifically speaking, at our church, we use liturgical colors for the seasons of the year to mark, normal time, Advent, so on and so forth. We do have art, discipleship through art, I should say it that way. That's part. We're in Denton, Texas, and so it's art school, film school, very easy to do that. But even at where I'm at Southwestern, I teach a visual art class as part of the humanities program. And you'd be shocked, you would be shocked, but it's interesting. There's a graduate we had, Danny, who, when he took that, he didn't do art before he took that class. And he pulled out, at the senior reception we had last week, he pulled out the latest watercolor he just did. It was like in a satchel. All right, go Danny. So to your point, like, the aesthetic is an important part of this that we certainly can explore more, and is not contrary to good Christian discipleship, and in fact can rescue some students off the precipice in those ways. That's a good thought.
To talk about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thankfully too, like Baptists have never been consistently puritanical on images. I mean, there have been seasons, right, where Baptists have kind of followed the more Puritan Reformed iconoclasm. But every little town has a First Baptist church with stained glass. You know, like it's not alien to our tradition to care about the beauty of our worship spaces. I think that we can recover that, right? We can recover something that is lost in warehouse spaces, right? And some of that obviously is owing to economic concerns and so on. So I don't mean to criticize any worship space, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a way we can recover things from within our own tradition, that we don't have to ape or mimic some other tradition, right? But at the same time, there is built into being a free church Baptist as well, a kind of healthy eclecticism, right? The tradition is not just one thing. And, sometimes Reformed folk have criticized evangelicals. I'm thinking here about Carl Trueman, who wrote a piece several years ago for First Things that kind of criticized evangelicals for doing the church year because it's so, it's not part of your tradition. You're just kind of pretending to be something you're not. And I just think as much as I respect Truman in many other ways, like what a paltry view of the church's Catholicity. Like the whole point of tapping into a more Catholic expression of our faith is that it's a collection of gifts, that there's a giving and a sharing, right? So that, and even like in that article compared it to sort of like a British person singing the national anthem, or almost like these are just completely incommensurate traditions. That's just not what the church is. The church is multinational, multi-denominational in the providence of God. Richard Mouw compares denominations as kind of analogous to the distinct monastic orders, in the Catholic Church. So the Franciscans have their own charism to bring, the Dominicans, and in the same way, Baptists and Presbyterians and Lutherans and Anglicans and Pentecostals, like they each have their own gifts to share. And we would be foolish not to receive those gifts, right? So that we can recover a sense of iconography. It doesn't mean we're going to venerate, right, or genuflect before them. We don't have that theology of the Eastern Church. But yeah, I just sort of laugh sometimes when I hear iconoclastic arguments that it's Nestorian and things like this. Was it Nestorian for the apostles if they had a memory of Jesus' face after he had ascended to heaven? Of course not. The sacred humanity of Christ is the vehicle of the divine revelation. So anyway, I'm all for it. Let's think theologically about our worship spaces.
Leland, you had your hand up a couple times. So.
Yeah. So I think I'm in a pretty solid Baptist context, but I would say the way that we, or the average lay member, even some of our leadership views of creeds and confessions, is like, this keeps us grounded and it keeps us from becoming heretics. We're going to stick to it. But I don't think there's an instinct to let a creed like Nicaea be sort of like an organizing principle, or like the sun in that solar system. So what are your thoughts on just cultivating that commitment in a Baptist context? Not just that the creeds are good and keep us from error, but that they help sort of like organize and prioritize what's beautiful and good and central.
Yeah.
How do you cultivate that in a local church context, among leaders, among students, things like that?
Yeah, you always have to I mean, this is the contextual work of ministry. Where are my people at? What can they handle in this moment? Is it right for me to just dump a bunch of creeds and icons, on them at some level? Probably not. Depends on where they're at. But I like what Luke said earlier in his presentation. Take your confessional statement and show where it affirms these things. Even if it's not explicitly saying Nicaea, your doctrine of Christ is Nicene, Chalcedonian, so on and so forth. So that's not a bad place to start. Even what Stefan's doing in her church, I'm not sure the structure, but working through the Creed of Nicaea in a classroom setting. Yeah, I do this in our membership class. In our membership document, our confession of faith rather, we highlight that we kind of work from top, big, sort of like a funnel approach, big to small. Like we're part of the Little C Catholic Church, Orthodox. We affirm Nicene, Athanasian, Apostles, can't remember the word, how we say that. Then we go, from the Reformation, Protestant Reformation, Baptist. So we sort of like delineate those things and define those things. But whenever I lead the class, I say, you might not have heard of this Nicene Creed before. Let's talk about it. And I don't do the whole exposition this way, but I help highlight some of the history, some of the issues, and so begin to tease that out. Regrettably, we don't have anything after that gives you any more instruction in those ways. So that's an opportunity there. But yeah, I think you just find the natural places to where you can highlight those things. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts where they've done that well, or
Make Sunday school great again.
Yes.
Community groups are great. They don't replicate what is lost if you get rid of Sunday school. Because that, obviously the preaching ministry of the church is the main vehicle for the word taught. But yeah, I mean, like you can do this in Sunday school. Right? I assume that's what you guys are doing. Bring back training union. I mean, like there's some kind of Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday morning.
Wednesday night discipleship. Yeah, that was 4 weeks for that course. With some this historical background to set it up so that they can understand the phrases the way that they're meant to be understood. Yeah.
So we need to make Sunday school great again with the big beautiful.
I've already ordered the banner. It's coming. So.
I had a question, if you don't mind. I agree with Stefano about deity is a much better term, more explicitly Nicene, if you will, than divinity. But I also wonder whether the language of true and truly may be better than full or fully, because full has a quantification to it that may be more, it may feed a Eunomian attitude that you can actually define the nature of God and so on. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. I think that's right.
Thank you.